Next, I would like to call Mr. Tom Lee, Restorative Justice Partners.
Hi everybody, today I'm not talking on behalf of Restorative Justice Partners, probably more accurately from the Jail Coalition.
Okay.
But I do want to talk about restorative justice, which is what Deshaun was just talking about. Restorative justice is about healing people and relationships. And a wonderful application is to crime, because that's a wonderful place to start. And I'm going to tell you today, since I don't have a whole lot of time, a real key to restorative justice. If you just remember this one thing about restorative justice, it's going to really unfold for you. But I wanted to talk just for a minute about what all of us have grown up with, which is what I call traditional justice, or retributive justice, or coercive justice. That's the justice where you have to do whatever it is. You have to pay the fine of $300. You have to have the 3-year sentence. You have to appear on December 15th at 3 p.m. in the afternoon in Salinas. They make the rules. You follow the rules. So it's coercive or compelling. You have to do it. You have no choice. The interesting thing about it is even if you break no laws and have never broken a law and you stop at all traffic signs, the system still calls you whenever it wants to, and you're compelled to appear. Can people tell me what the example of that is?
The jury.
Jury duty, yeah. And jury duty is you have no choice. Sometimes I like the idea of restorative jury duty where they have to convince you to come in. And maybe if they do that, you would do a better job. But I wanted to read you the penalty for not doing your jury duty. Okay, I'll stand in front here like I'm supposed to. Pursuant to Code of Civil Procedures, Section 209, any juror who fails to respond to a jury summons as directed may be found in contempt of court, punishable by a fine, incarceration, or both. So, now how many people follow this? It's about half of people do this. My friend, whenever he gets he's been doing this for 30 years, whenever he gets a jury summons notice, he immediately shreds it. And he hasn't heard from them in 30 years. So that's the problem with the traditional justice system. It really wants, it says you have to do this, you must do this, you must do it as we tell you to do it, but it often doesn't work. Not only do people not show up, but they don't get reformed either, which is probably the more serious thing. So restorative justice is quite different in that no one is compelled to do anything that they don't want to do. We make no pretense of us having any real authority over people to make people do anything. It's all voluntary. And that's the strength of restorative justice. In restorative justice, the idea is, if there's a conflict, I don't know, someone is playing their music loud, that's what Deshaun was talking about. First, if I'm a practitioner, if I'm one that wants to help the situation, say an outsider, I go talk to the one who's playing the music too loud, and I listen to that person. Even if he doesn't want to turn his music down, he doesn't have to do that. Not according to restorative justice. But after I listen to him, he may say, well, you know, maybe I do want to turn it down. And then the next thing that a practitioner does, talks to the victim, listens to the victim. What's it like to have loud music playing all day and night at your house? What's that like? You know, listen to that. And then, if they're willing, you get them to talk to each other. Can you have a conversation about this? Can you work it out? Can you make it right, or as right as possible? And once you do that, well, first of all, When are you going to do that? Even that's negotiated. So there's no having to do anything.
Sounds good to me.
So one of the advantages of restorative justice, or what I call RJ for short, is that a whole set of different skills is required to do it well. In other words, the traditional system, what are the skills? As we heard earlier from Rita, unfortunately, sometimes it amounts to learning how to be violent. It's learning how to argue in a courtroom, no offense to people like Philip here, who's really on the side of the people. But it's sort of different skills that are required. But in RJ, one of the main skills is to persuade people. And not to persuade them to do what I want them to do. That would just be non-voluntary again, really, if I was to twist someone's arm. But to get them to talk to the other person. That's the skill of the persuasion that's needed. The other skill that's really needed in RJ is to listen well. Listen well. And that's a challenge for a lot of us, to really listen well. And let's say that you talk to the person who had the music too loud, and then you talk to listen, and then you talk to the other person, and they don't want to talk. They don't want to get together. You've still done something. You've still listened to people. And that's the first part of restorative justice, is just healing people. So there's no outcome that's in particular that's required for restorative justice to thrive. Your goal is a mediation, of course, to make things right, to get an agreement for it not to happen again. But you don't need that to happen for it to go well. How many here remember the show Dragnet? Remember the famous line in that? What's the famous question? Just the facts, right. Just the facts, ma'am. Well, in RJ, the facts are fine. We need to go over the facts, but the feelings are important. And the traditional courtroom setting doesn't really like feelings, because it's all about factual evidence. We need the date, time, we need what happened. In RJ, we're interested in the feelings of people. What happened when the music was played too loud? What did that do to your heart rate? What did that do to your brain? You know, what was it like for you? Because when you start allowing feelings and people to express them and express them to each other in a safe place, then that's where the healing comes from. That's when the healing starts to take place. We also have feelings in the traditional system, but for the defendants, it may be feelings of terror, like we were hearing from Rita earlier, of intense fear, and those aren't the kind of feelings that are going to help us heal. So in RJ, we try to set up a safe environment so people can say what's really in their minds and hearts, and get over it, and go on with their lives. Well, just getting towards my closing here, I want to say that the RJ and the traditional justice, they're not incompatible. They're very philosophically different, but they can work together. And I'm going to give you one example here of that. Yesterday, I went all the way up to San Quentin Prison north of San Francisco for a restorative justice symposium inside the prison, run by the inmates, run by maximum security inmates, run by inmates who have in their history doing horrible things like armed robbery and murder and those kinds of things. And they have used the tool of restorative justice to listen to each other, to meet with each other. Sometimes they meet with their victims. That's part of restorative justice. If you're in prison, to meet with the person that you harmed face to face. And it was absolutely amazing going inside a prison and being at a conference when people could interact freely, outsiders with inmates, and have a discussion about some of these principles. It was interesting too because the subject under discussion was transgender men who became women. And there were a couple of speakers of men dressed in traditionally women's clothes, talking about transgender. And there was, among the inmates, lots of difficulty among some of them to that concept. So it wasn't as if anyone had to believe anything in particular. And I just wanted to leave you with the idea, in terms of the symposium, restorative justice was all voluntary. The prisoners could sign up for it if they wanted to. They could go to the symposium if they wanted to. They could. They invited outsiders to come participate, and I think that's so. In the middle of the most coercive institution you can imagine, the maximum security San Quentin prison, people were starting to reclaim their lives by making choices for themselves and not having them imposed on them. So I think that's the promise of restorative justice is, as Pamela was saying, it's the power of the people. They don't decide for us. We decide on our own terms what's best for us. Thank you.
Okay, next we're going to have a youth come and share something with us. And her name is Miss Sabrina Henry Hunter. Oh, and she has a mother who is a teacher in Alvarez School. Alvarez School. And then her grandmother is also a teacher in the MPUSD school district. And yeah, so here she is.
So as she said, my name is Sabrina Henry Hunter, and I'm a freshman at Everett Alvarez High School. And I wrote this monologue to describe the way that I feel about some of these incidents that have happened. I can't breathe. Can you hear me? I said I can't breathe. I'm crying out to you. I hope you can hear me. Do you hear me? Do you even care? I can't breathe because of the sexism, classism, racism trapping me in this society. I can't breathe because of the hurtful words I am told telling me that I will not be able to succeed. I can't breathe because my black brothers and sisters have been made blind to the things that they can be. I can't breathe. But what's the point of screaming, shouting, and pleading? Because you know I'm here, and I've told you how I feel, and I'm not the first. My ancestors sang to their sorrows as they worked in the fields. Harriet Tubman made it clear that we had to escape to a place that we could breathe. Abraham Lincoln, though he might have worn a top hat and beard, those garments did not cover up his ears. Because he did hear, and he tried to get you to hear, but you didn't. So he risked it all to make the change on his own. Martin Luther King Jr., Thurgood Marshall, Rosa Parks, and so many more. They told you we couldn't breathe, and it took you a while, but you did something you thought would make us feel free. Integration. But America has taught me that though you might integrate, you can still easily segregate, and furthermore, suffocate. For a moment, I thought I could breathe, that I didn't have to worry about people poisoning the air, because I was protected. But when I look at the stories on the news and compare all of the evidence, and when I think about the police and their brutality, I begin to wonder, if the police are the people who put me in a chokehold, who will help me when I cry out, I can't breathe? I can't breathe. Sorry. I'm telling you I can't breathe. Because, I'm telling you I can't breathe. And now you have killed Walter Scott and Freddie Gray. And they truly can't breathe. So please, when I tell you I can't breathe, listen, because I can't live in this choke.
Wow, that was phenomenal, woman. So, wow, sorry, that was just total awesomeness. I just love art in all of its capacities, and it speaks volumes, and I really appreciated that. Next, we're going to have Bill Crawford. He is an attorney.
Good afternoon. My name is Philip Crawford, and I'm a criminal defense attorney in private practice here in Monterey County. I'm going to talk a little bit about your rights when you encounter the police, both how you can act in a way that's where you're aware of your rights, and also hopefully act in a way that minimizes the chances that you're going to be killed or injured in the course of the interaction. And I'll start by saying it may come as a surprise to some of you that I've never been a black man in America. So my experience with the police, although overall I would describe them as unpleasant, my interactions with the police are always going to be different from those of people of color. And I'm never going to be in the level, face the level of danger in those confrontations that people who don't look like me have. And so I'm aware of that fact, but I want to impart what I do know about how to best get through these unpleasant situations. So, since the theme here is pause the calls, I do want to let you know that here in Monterey County, if the police show up, somebody's going to jail. So if you want somebody to go to jail, call the police. But if that's not what you want, you're better off not calling them. Particularly on any kind of domestic situation, if the police show up, it's almost like they're so hacked off that they had to show up that they're not going to leave till somebody's in cuffs. And usually what they just do when they look and see who's the person who looks the worst off physically, and will arrest that person and let the courts sort that out. And if somebody's arrested, the likelihood that that person is eventually going to plead guilty to something is over 90%. So once you're arrested and charged, it's extraordinarily high likelihood you're going to end up pleading guilty. You're not going to go to trial, because hardly anybody goes to trial. You plead out, you plead to something. So if you want someone arrested, you want somebody to go to jail, call the police. Otherwise, you probably shouldn't. So let's say the police do come. So what are some simple things you need to know? Now, Tom mentioned dragnet. Now, I must have heard this about 6,000 times by the time I was 10, because I watched so much TV. So what do the police say on TV every time they arrest somebody? They say, you have the right to remain silent. Yes, okay. Now, so when I was told I had 15 minutes, I'm actually not going to take 15 minutes. I thought, well, what could I do? What's the best thing I could do for 15 minutes? Probably I could stand here and say, don't talk to the cops, don't talk to the cops, and just repeat that for 15 minutes. That would probably be the best use of my time. Don't talk to the cops. And I say that with the full knowledge that if everyone followed that simple rule, I would have to get a different job. Because that's the number one thing that gets people arrested is talking. And I never understand it. Every time I talk to a new potential client, they just start, well, I told the police this and I told them that, and I was really cooperative and I was really honest, and I'm thinking, and you think that was a good idea? And when I mean don't talk to the cops, I mean don't talk to the cops. Don't say a word. There is no situation in which you are legally obligated to answer any question that a police officer asks you. Period. You do not have to answer any questions, whether you're arrested or not arrested. You don't have to answer any questions.
But the cops make it seem like
They always make it.
you're guilty if you don't talk to them.
So,
It's even illegal to lie to you.
I
The
know.
cops can lie to you.
and even worse, but they can lie to you, but you can't lie to them. So
Right.
that's another thing. If you do happen to talk, don't lie, because that's just going to make it worse. So, but the number one thing is don't talk. So that means they ask you, do you know what day it is? Officer, I'd love to have that conversation with you, but my lawyer told me not to talk to you. And he would be so mad if I talked to him. So you don't have to be argumentative about it. You can be as polite as you want. You know, I really prefer not to answer that question. Don't answer any questions, period. The other thing is do not consent to a search. And what I mean, what I'm not saying is resist the search, because probably an even bigger mistake than talking to the cops, if there is one, is physically resisting a police officer. That's never going to get you anywhere, because they always are going to have, they're going to always be able to escalate to a level that you can't go to, because they're almost likely to have more force at their disposal than you do. So you can't resist. You can just say, I don't consent to a search. If they're going to search you, they'll do it. If they're going to search your house, they're going to search your car. If they want to do it, they'll do it. You can't stop it. But the important thing is that you don't give them the permission to do it. So, because you're not going to win that battle by resisting them, it's just going to make it worse for you. Later on, down the line, you can have a lawyer go to court and fight. You know, if they found something you wish they hadn't found, let the lawyer deal with that later, because that's an arena in which you at least have a chance of prevailing. But you're not going to prevail in a physical confrontation with the police. So, the number one thing, don't talk to the cops. Ask for a lawyer. You always say, I won't answer that question without a lawyer. I'd like to talk to a lawyer, whatever. That's really the only thing that the only things that be coming out of your mouth are, I'd like to talk to a lawyer. I don't consent to a search. And the other one is, am I free to go? So if a police officer stops you on the street, say, officer, am I free to go? And if he says, or she says, yes, walk away. If they say no, then wait till they're done doing whatever they're going to do. But, am I free to go? Don't consent to a search, and I'm not talking without a lawyer, whatever. Again, you don't have to be belligerent about it. I mean, the truth is, you can exercise all the rights you have, and they can be totally wrong, and you can end up injured or dead. So, I always advise people, be as pleasant as you can possibly be under the circumstances, but be firm, polite but firm. Officer, I prefer not to answer any questions without a lawyer. Officer, I prefer not to answer any questions without a lawyer. Am I free to go? I don't consent to a search. I mean, that's really it. And if people follow those rules, like I said, I'd have to get an honest job.
Yeah.
Yes?
And if they are going to detain you, you can ask them to articulate why they're holding you.
Yeah, you can ask them. They don't have to tell you, but
Because
so-
you have to be suspected of a crime for them
Yeah.
to detain you.
yeah, it's nice to have that information. I'm sorry, yes.
I would think that if a policeman already is predisposed to being unfair with people of color, and let's say that young black man says the things that you're, wouldn't that really anger the policeman and maybe cause him to want to punch that black man?
Well, so here's the thing. You have to decide how you're going to exercise your rights. I mean, you should never consent to a search. You should never answer any questions, period. But you don't have to be belligerent about it. If I mean, sure, you can, the way you interact with them can maybe more or less likely that they're going to escalate things. But your goal has got to be, I'm going to de-escalate this. I'm going to be peaceful. I'm going to be calm. I know it's not always easy to be calm in those situations, but the calmer you are, the firm, polite but firm, not argumentative. Not argumentative. Just no. I prefer not to answer the question. Don't argue with them. If they search your car and you don't think they have the right to, don't argue with them about you don't have the right to do that. That doesn't get you anywhere. You can bring that up later, because if they're going to do it, they're going to do it. They don't care that you don't think it's right. So just say, I don't consent to that, and then let them do it. The other thing is about your ID. And this is a judgment call. If you're driving and the police stop you and they ask for your ID, you have to give them your ID. You don't have to do anything else. I mean, they tell you to step out of the car, you have to step out of the car. You don't have to do the breath tests, you don't have to do the tests and everything that they think you're DUI, but you don't have to let them search your car. But you can't stop them. You can say, I don't consent, and then if they do it, they do it. That's all you have to say. Don't try to argue with them, because it's just going to make it worse. If you're walking down the street and they ask for your ID, you don't have to give it. You don't. Now, you can choose to give it because you want, if you want to, but you don't have to. And that's where you get into, am I making things better or worse for myself here? The thing is, even if you don't give them your ID and you're arrested, you're never going to get out of jail until you produce that ID. They're not going to let you out until they know who you are and where they can find you if they want to. So that's a situation where you can choose, do I want to exercise this right or do I not want to exercise this right? Do I want to get this, am I going to get this over faster if I produce my ID? Then I'll do it. But you don't have to. But again, there's just really three basic rules. Politely but firmly. I don't consent to a search. You don't have to say it once. I prefer not to answer any questions. Am I free to go? That's really the only three things that should come out of your mouth. And again, my advice, not legal advice, but survival advice, not getting your head busted advice, is do it in as pleasant a way as you can muster. Don't argue with them. Don't resist. Don't resist it. They want to search. I don't consent. Let them search. Because they're going to search anyway. And once you said, I don't consent, then later on, your lawyer can deal with that in a terrain where you have a chance of not getting your ass kicked. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Philip. You make me feel good because I'm a know-it-all and you confirmed everything that I already knew. Next, we're going to welcome our district assemblyman, Mark Stone.
Hello.
Hello. My name is Mark Stone. Stone, and I have the honor of representing the 29th Assembly District, which is northern Monterey County and most of Santa Cruz County. And I was asked to come today to talk a little bit about what's been going on in the legislature with respect to issues that I know you care about and that I care about. And this last year we had some good news and some challenges, as we usually do through the legislative session. But some of the things that I think are germane that we've been struggling with really on a statewide level is around violence, rules around changing the prison system, rules around sort of what our role is with respect to a lot that's been happening, and with the backdrop of what's happening in Ferguson and other places throughout the country. Well, I think, first of all, one of the cautions that I have is, I'll hear time and time again is, well, that can't happen in California. Well, we know that's not true, and it's not true if we accept that premise, and it's not true if we're not paying attention to also what's happening in California. We have, due to I think a number of laws and a number of things that have changed, ballot initiatives and such over the last 20 or 30 years, we've really lost the ability to talk about race and talk about what the impacts are on race relations and how we view each other in all of our communities. And I think we're seeing that in a number of different ways. One of the ways that we did have some good effect this last year was we're starting to change the rules on racial profiling and what police can and can't do and how they're reporting when there are circumstances of racial profiling, so that they're being held much more accountable. And then there's this trend towards body cameras, which I think is very helpful to creating a more accurate record of what's happening in interaction with authority and someone who's not in authority. The state's role in that is what we've been trying to do, and we're not successful this year, but what we're trying to do was set some rules around body cameras, data retention, what happens in that interaction, so that as local jurisdictions adopt them, and there seems to be a great interest in most local jurisdictions, police departments, sheriff's departments, etc., in acquiring body cameras and creating that record, but we're trying to make sure that we're setting appropriate rules around them so that that record is available, that it is not used beyond what we would expect it to be used for. In other words, to understand what happened in that interaction, but really ultimately no further. Because there's information about anybody who's on that camera that you would not necessarily want used in ways that you wouldn't anticipate there. So a way that just records what happened, holds both parties, if you will, accountable for what happened. Something that tells the truth about that interaction. So that's a good thing. But we weren't quite successful in creating that rule yet. I think that'll be coming back this next legislative session, at least I hope so. And then some things that I have been very much involved with, and that is in changing what happens to folks who are, once they're in jail, and the opportunities that they're given as they move through that process and then come back out of jails, or especially state prisons, and then into the communities. Because we don't do that, as you well know, the department at the state is the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. And the rehabilitation, I would think of as a small R, and getting a little bit better, but their role that they see is to incarcerate and hold people accountable, which is fine, but the rehabilitation part is what we're missing. And that's one of the reasons that we have such a high recidivism rate in California. Upwards of 70% of the people who leave jails or prisons within a year will be back in jail or prison. And as I talk in prisons, especially I've gone to a number of different programs to see what's happening in those prisons, and some that are generated by the inmates themselves, others are brought in to give inmates an opportunity to learn about what was affecting their lives before, what their expectations are now when they come out. And in talking to those groups, usually what I say is, no offense, but we don't want you back. And most of them don't want to come back either, but don't feel that they're given the tools, education. They're not equipped once they get out to be able to address what's been going on in their lives so that they don't come back in. That's the piece that I and others have been working on, and trying to fund more of those programs that are strengthening our communities and strengthening the tools that individuals who are in jail or prison, when they come back out. One minor one, and I'm still scratching my head why I even had to do it, was to require the state to give a driver's license or California ID to everybody who is in jail or in prison when they come back out. Because it's a real impediment to success to not have a valid identification card. They have their prison ID card, but that's not going to get you a job. That's not going to connect you with services. Nobody wants to use those, and for good reason. So we have set up hurdles, ultimately, to people's success when they're coming back out of jail. And for those who are willing to participate in programming, those who are really willing to understand their relationships and what's been going on with them, I think that they need that opportunity then to take advantage of programming so that they have the best chance of success once they're out before they get in. That's, again, something we haven't been able to put much money to. And if you think about, if we could drop the recidivism rate in California from 67% down to 50%, that's literally hundreds of millions of dollars that could be much better spent on education, much better spent on social services, much better spent in our communities in a way that helps protect our communities and helps protect the situation so that we're feeding jails. California doesn't have any higher crime rate than any other state in the country, but we have a much higher incarceration rate. And I think that's a problem, that's a symptom of a lot of the Get Tough on Crime and ballot initiatives we've had about perspectives at the state level and at local level that's really not been helping the situation. Those are some of the things that are driving the high recidivism rates. I was also on a panel not very long ago talking about the militarization of police. And I know there's an example here. There are other places not far away that have looked at getting very expensive, high-end equipment from the military to be able to use on the streets of our communities. And I think my question there, and the state's been sort of struggling on how we set bounds and what our role with that is, but especially because it's a relationship between a local government and the federal government. One of the bills that we were successful in changing this year would have allowed local jurisdictions to have a conversation about what they're going to acquire in the way of military equipment away from the public eye. They could have done it in closed sessions. Well, we were successful in carving that piece out so that if there's a community that is a jurisdiction looking at that equipment, they have to do it with your engagement. They have to explain it to you and do it in a public forum. Otherwise, they're making decisions that you don't necessarily know about and yet impact our communities. And the real question that I have is, we know symbols matter. And for a police force to have a very large, kind of frightening bit of equipment like these sort of armored vehicles and things that some of the jurisdictions have been getting from the military, what does that really say about the relationship between the police and their community? If you see that vehicle rolling down the streets of Seaside, which I know you have, because I know it's been used here, is that something that sends the right message from the authority to the people who are feeling the pressure from the local authorities? I'm not sure that that's a really good answer, and I'm not sure that anybody has a good answer for why a vehicle like that belongs in our communities. Is the threat level really that high, or is it just something that boys like their toys, and sometimes it's fun to have the latest equipment? But as I think I talked about in that forum, when you have a hammer, right, everything looks like a nail, and when you have a piece of equipment, the impetus is to want to use it, even if it may or may not be appropriate. So I think from the state level, we're on a better track if we're trying to make sure that local communities are involved in that conversation, and those vehicles, those military pieces of equipment are not being used without you being a part of that conversation. We'll see how that develops, and try to set better frameworks for decisions that are being made at the local level. And then a lot of the work that I'm doing, trying to reduce recidivism, trying to make sure that we have programs in place. At the state level, it's harder for me to dictate to local jurisdictions, but I think if we set a better example at the state level, we can then have a better framework for local jurisdictions making the right decisions about their incarcerated populations. So I'm happy to answer a few questions. I'm not sure how much time I have, but yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
When ex-offenders are released, it just seems to me that there should be something in place for them. They don't have access to food assistance. They don't have access to housing assistance. Employers will not hire them. So when they're released, to expect them not to go back
Right.
to the life. I mean, that just seems foolish to me when we don't have some safety nets in place for them. So my question to you is, what type of legislation can we offer so that a man has access to food and housing, and so that, because who wants, when they're little boys, they don't say, ooh, I think I want to grow up and be a prisoner. No, they have dreams and aspirations. So what are we doing to make sure that when they serve their time, that they're giving a true second chance to be successful in the community, as I'm sure they want to be successful.
And they do, and they
Yeah.
do. There are honestly a few that I've talked to that don't seem to quite get it yet.
Yes.
But for the most part, they do. They want to come back, and when you talk to some of these men,
Yeah.
young men and not so young men, when they go through some of the programs,
Mm-hmm.
the sense of hope that they feel when they're given that opportunity.
Yeah.
And so making sure, and that's why I brought up the ID card.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get those benefits.
That's
Housing, you can't go on food stamps, you can't get access if you don't have an ID.
Mm-hmm.
So why are we not giving out IDs for everybody that's leaving prison?
Yes.
I still don't have an answer to that question, and we're still not completely doing that job. We're hitting now, under a bill I got passed last year, about 80%,
Okay.
which is much better than happened before. But it starts while still in prison, that there's programs available for people to understand where they had been and where they want to go. And it's things like anger management, it's financial literacy, it's job training skills. Those are very, very important. And then we have a real problem in the state of California with you mentioned housing,
Yeah.
critical issue. Because if somebody comes out of prison and doesn't have a prospect for a job,
That's right.
doesn't have access to the kinds of social services, food that they would want, doesn't have a prospect of a roof over their head, then they'll often take the easy way out and go back to what they know. That's what we have to prevent. But I also think it belongs, which is why I'm real happy that you're here and talking about it, because it starts, to me, it starts earlier than that. Instead of investing in prison, we have got to invest in families when they have very young children. Because when we can sort of affect, that's where the opportunity gaps start, that's where the educational, the academic gaps start. And if we can serve young families, teach young parents how to be parents, give kids quality early care and education so that they're ready to go to school, we actually start to break some of those cycles. Third grade reading levels are a very good indicator of whether a child is going to go to prison, graduate high school. Third grade reading levels. Third grade reading levels are also affected by 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and 4-year-olds and how we get them ready for school. So wouldn't we be smarter investing in those programs, which are core to our communities, than having to build more jail beds? Right? Well, the research all shows that this is true. I think you know that this is true. But we're having a hard time institutionalizing that notion. So organizing from the communities, talking about early childhood education, talking about support for families, connecting people to these programs are things that you can do. In the meantime, if you do have ideas that we can be working on to help, I for one am happy to kind of work on those. I see Taina came in. We tried to build this last year. That was Taina Vargas Edmond. If you don't know her, she's someone you absolutely have to know. Had an idea, which was a very good idea, that if we take somebody in prison and we provide incentives for them, maybe some reductions in sentence, to go to those programs we know reduce recidivism, why wouldn't we do that? Well, unfortunately, that bill got watered down to the point where it's not what I had hoped, and I know it's not what Taina had hoped for it to be, and we're still trying to find a way for it to be useful, but there's lots of other forces that are at work to take what I think are good ideas and kind of turn them into something that's not such a good idea, but we have to keep trying.
What percentage of the California prisoners are sent to the private for-profit prisons, which I think is a big thing about why people are not being helped to get ready to succeed when they come out, because somebody wants a profit.
Right. And the state, I don't know what the percentage is, but to me, whatever that percentage is too much. We have to take responsibility for our own systems, and just sending them out of state is more expensive, but also much more impactful on that family, because that contact that any prisoner has with their family is critical ultimately for their success when they do get out. And you can't do that when they're in Arizona or Mississippi or some far-flung places. So we are working to reduce that within the state. There are even some of our juveniles that are sent out of state, which is entirely unacceptable. And we still have some work to do also in the juvenile programs, although we've really made some strides. I think California's made some strides there in minimizing the number of kids that are in the juvenile system and making sure that we're dealing with that population, which is a very different question than the adult population. But we should not be, and since we're under federal court order now to fix the system, part of getting out from underneath that is make sure we have enough beds in California for our prisoners. So, yes, sir.
I just wanted to mention, I think like a big problem right now with the citizens is parole and probation officers. The parole department, I just got off parole, I'm in college, a little bit about to graduate, so I fixed my life. But I've been in jail for one time for being a member. I was in a car with a friend who wasn't on parole or probation, hadn't been in any trouble at all. And I had a blue Nike sign on my shoes, and I was arrested and took to jail for a parole violation because they decided that we shouldn't be hanging out together even though it's illegal and wrong. And then I still got detained and went to jail for that. So I just wanted to know, is there any work on like stuff like that about parole or probation or anything like that going on?
There is, but under the realignments, where the state's pushing more responsibility down to the local levels, my worry is, and mostly what I can directly affect is at the state level, and so that would be parole. Different counties are taking different approaches to dealing with the incarcerated in their county, men, women, and juveniles, as well as probation. And what we have to make sure, and what that ultimately means, what I'm really worried about, what that means is depending on the politics, the political will of that county, you're going to have a different experience county to county. Some counties are going to have very good programs that help you and help make sure you don't come back. Some counties don't care and just want to lock up as many people, especially people of color, as they possibly can. When you look at local jails and you look at the prisons, it's mostly men of color, and which should be included to help explain the heart of some of what's going on, but it doesn't seem to resonate with some folks. Some places like Central Valley counties, they want to lock up as many people as they possibly can. And the state needs to then be providing incentives to those counties who are doing it right, that are doing the kinds of programming, not just building more jail capacity, but building, if they're going to be building the right kinds of programming and space to be able to assist people to not come back. And that should be part of the bottom line. So we'll probably find some differences. A lot of the programs that I've seen in different counties throughout the state, some probation officers are doing a very good job at connecting and being a resource rather than punitive, but it's going to depend county to county, unfortunately. Yes, sir?
Here, a couple of quick things. One, the last thing we want are private prisons because they're in business to make money.
Right.
It's not in their best interest to rehabilitate these folks because they want them coming back. If they don't have any prisoners, they don't make any money.
But yeah, that's very true, and there is no compelling state interest for sending people to private prisons when that's an inherently governmental function.
And I taught at the prison in Soledad for a couple of years, and my favorite people in there were the prisoners. And I was literally instructed, what caused me to leave was my final thing was they have a daily movement sheet. And every day a prisoner who's not going to be exactly where he's supposed to be, they put on this list. And sometimes it's like 15 pages. And one day I looked down, there's a student who's not going to be in my class. I didn't know he was in my class. So I looked back and sure, like 3 months earlier, he had been assigned to my class. I didn't know it. And so I sent a note to his cell, came up, and was going to ask him why he hadn't been coming to class. And my boss comes up and says, "What's the problem?" He says, "Well, he was assigned to my class a while ago and he hasn't come. I'm just asking him why." He says, "Well, write him up." I said, "I don't know why he hasn't been. Write him up." And the teacher next door comes out and says, "No, don't write him up. He's been coming to my class." And so if we treat these folks with some respect and consideration, they'll be more likely to treat others with respect and consideration when they get out, less likely to go back.
Yeah, that goes back to, isn't that one of the lessons that we all should have taken away from kindergarten for crying out loud? Treat others with respect, and it will be reciprocated. We sometimes seem to lose that. So I know it's about 4 o'clock, I think, and I'm going to need to leave, but I appreciate your time. Maureen McCarty is my district director. She's in the back there. I'm just getting over still trying to get over the fact that Taina Vorga-Sedman now is at the Ella Baker Center and left my office. Yay! But she was an absolute amazing and inspiring resource for me and for all of us, and I think you're going to have the pleasure of hearing from her in a little bit. But my phone number in the district office is 425-1503. Look me up, Mark Stone, on the web. If you want to contact me, send me an email or my staff. If there's anything that we can do, let us know. Thank you.
Next, I would like to ask Michael Ferguson to come up, and he's going to tell us about Cop Watch.
Hi everyone, I'm going to pass out these flyers with some more information, and also on the back the front side is about Cop Watch, which I'll talk about, and the back side is just know your rights information, basically covering what Phil talked about. We got this from the Cop Watch group in Berkeley, but they borrowed it from the ACLU, so it's from a group of lawyers. So pass it around and grab one. So my name is Michael. I'm aside from helping put on and organize these Pause Calls events, and also working here at the Monterey Peace and Justice Center, I'm also part of a group called the Direct Action Monterey Network. That's the hat I'm wearing now. One of the projects we engage in. Also, there's seats up front if people want to come up, because I see people standing back a little bit every now and then. Anyway, one of the projects that we engage in is called Cop Watch. It's a pretty informal organization. It's not really even an organization, more like a practice. Some people do this much more formally in Berkeley. I've seen groups forming in like Ferguson and other places that are a little bit more formalized. People even have like t-shirts and hats and signs and everything. But really, I want to talk about it more as like a general practice that we can all engage in. This is really something we can go out right now and engage in, and Cop Watch as a name, as a group, as a practice and a movement started probably a couple decades ago now. But now, I mean, almost everyone has a smartphone. I don't, but I go around with friends who do, and you can bring a camera with you. So this is actually something that we can all engage with. Like I said, right now when you go home, and the basic premise of it, usually we do like an hour-long or more workshop, so we don't have time for that. So I'm just going to go over the basics, and you have this information, and there's tons of resources in this box here. You can look at all these different websites for more information. So the main idea of it is, it's actually built on the foundation of what Phil talked about, which is de-escalating, understanding your legal rights, all those kind of things. But then it's kind of the next step. It's a little bit more of an active thing, and you can do this really, really actively. Like the Direct Action Monterey Network, basically my friends and I, we go around downtown Monterey, mostly where most of us live, and where a lot of our homeless friends are constantly being harassed and attacked and beaten and arrested by the police. And we walk around there, but this is something you can do in your neighborhood. But again, it doesn't have to be quite so formal or such a formal practice. This can be a reaction that you have when you see the cops stopping someone and harassing someone. And the main idea behind it is you want to capture the incident on film, and it's better if the cops know that you're doing it, because hopefully they will be a little less aggressive in their behavior. They know they're on film. So in one way, it's about immediately trying to de-escalate through this some form of accountability. And again, this is all direct. It's all about us actually trying to empower ourselves through this and not relying on political institutions or the courts, which we know are all part of the same political structure that create and use the police. And so it's about doing this really directly, really like as grassroots as you can get. And it's about, and then also another goal of it is to potentially have footage that can help the person if they are arrested or if they're attacked or worse. This isn't always foolproof. So Rita spoke about her son Jose. The cops who beat him, that was caught on footage by someone passing by in their car, and it was put on YouTube. And he's still facing charges, I believe, for attacking the police that actually attacked him, even though it was caught on film. So this isn't always foolproof. That also leads me to another resource that we offer, which is if you don't want to put this film up online, then we can do it for you. So actually, there was another video that went up later that we put up showing Jose being dragged, well, carried, kind of dragged out of the street with a bag over his head and blood underneath that bag that our friend happened to capture, and they didn't want to put it online themselves. So we put it on for them. So we also want to provide that anonymity for people who don't want to put themselves out there. And then I also want to echo what Phil mentioned about, I'm also, like Phil, a white man. I experience this world and my interaction with the police totally differently than people of color, poor people, homeless people who are targeted more by the police. So that's also should be kind of underlying all of this. But there are communities, such as communities in Ferguson and other places that are targeted by the police who are using this method. And in a way, it kind of harkens back to like when the Black Panthers would patrol Oakland with guns, because you could do that back then before Ronald Reagan freaked out and the state of California freaked out that all these Black power groups were arming themselves. And that's actually the origin of gun restrictions, but that's another whole story. Yeah. So, in a way, this kind of harkens back to that. But the main point of that, the guns were unloaded, right? They couldn't walk around with loaded guns. But the main point of that was, again, to patrol the police. So the police knew that they were being watched by other members of the police. And that's really what cop watching is about. So in a way, it makes sense that during this resurgence of the kind of Ferguson moment, as it's called, or with the Black Lives Matter movement, that this is actually a resurgence as well. The idea of patrolling your community and watching the police and following them around, making sure that they, trying to hold them accountable in some way. Even though it's not foolproof. So, normally, like I said, I have like an hour or more, and we go through, we practice this, and we practice what to say and how to say it, and the main rules is kind of what Philip said. You don't really want to talk to the police, but if they engage with you while you're filming them interacting with someone, harassing someone, or even just stopping someone, I think it was mentioned during that the police can lie. They can say all kinds of things about how far you need to be and all these kind of things. And people get arrested doing this, even though it's entirely legal to film the police. So it's basically the same principles. You want to de-escalate. You want to make sure that your body language and your actual verbal communication is all about de-escalating and not about presenting yourself as more aggressive. And to understand that you have to use your intuition. If you don't feel safe doing it, you probably shouldn't do it. It's so right, like your safety is as important as a person who you're trying to help out. And so your safety and actually also the person who is being harassed or stopped or whatever by the police, their needs and their desires are also really important. And so if you can, you actually it's recommended to try to communicate to them that you're there to make sure that the cops don't abuse their power in their interaction with them. Because you don't want them to think, oh, these people are just messing with me, they're going to put this on YouTube, and it's going to be pretty funny. And, you don't want them to think these kind of things because they're already in a stressful situation. And if they really tell you they don't want you to film them, you probably shouldn't. And you also have to be careful about putting footage online because it could be used potentially against the people who the cops are interacting with. So it's a lot of intuition, it's a lot of based on what you think is best and also what the person thinks is best who you're filming. So there's lots of other information on here, such as trying to write down the cops' badge numbers, car numbers, all that kind of information just to record this. And again, the main part of that, just like having that footage there, is to potentially help this person if the cops, as they usually do when they attack someone, they charge that person for attacking them, right? They turn it around. So anyway, there's lots more information on here that you can go over, and like I said, there's more resources on here. I think there's a couple questions, but I think we're also going to try to answer questions at the end.
Yeah.
And also, because I think we're trying to wrap up the speakers and get food and have a discussion. So I think I'll just leave that for the end. You can come up to me. You can go here. And you can also, I don't think this is on here, but we have the Direct Action Monterey Network as a WordPress. It's just directactionmonterey.network.wordpress.com. So anyway, come talk to me or look on these resources if you're interested in this. And if we do end up doing, like I said, we usually do longer workshops around this to get people to practices, to build up the confidence to be able to film the police and be affirmative but de-escalating, as Phil talked about. So we'll probably be able to send that information out if you get on like mailing list here. So I think I'll just wrap it up with that since there's a lot more to go on with, but just check out the resources here.